All right, well, I'm going to get us started, and I'll just say off the top, this is going to be recorded, and we'll be posting it to the Maddie site as well. So if you or colleagues want to return to it, you'll be able to do that as well. But thank you for joining this afternoon. My name is Kyle Shelton. I'm the director of the Center for Transportation Studies at the University of Minnesota. I'm going to ask my colleague Beth Andrews to wave as well. She's the program manager for the Maddie team. And you'll be corresponding with her if you decide to apply and do the expression of interest and other things. So just wanted to put a face to that name as well, but I'm going to be walking us through most of the webinar stuff today. So I'm the co-PI for this program along with our colleague Yingling Fan from the Humphrey School of Public Affairs here at the University of Minnesota. This is the third round. We're talking about the third round of the Mobility, Access, and Transportation Insecurity program today. The RFP was released about a week ago, and we'll be talking through some of what is going to be happening in round three. Have some time at the end to answer some questions. Again, the information from the webinar itself will be is being recorded and will be posted. And then when we move into the Q&A, we'll stop recording that. But any questions that seem pertinent to multiple people, we will be posting on an ongoing basis on the Maddie website. And I'll talk through more of those things as we go. I'm probably not going to stop mid-stream, but you are welcome to put questions into the Q&A or into the chat, sorry, at any point, and I will return to those when we get to the Q&A at the second part of the presentation today. Oops, sorry. There you go. That one changed for everybody, I think. Yep. Okay. So first starting just with what is transportation insecurity for those of you who have maybe joined for previous versions of this discussion or who are working in this area. It may be a term that is not new to you, but it is certainly something that is growing in attention and profile in the transportation space. And it's really thinking about um, why and how people are unable to reach needed destinations they may be looking to go to in timely, safe, and comfortable manners. If you're not able to do that, that's a version of transportation insecurity. Other examples of that might be that you either miss or don't take trips because you may lack a stable access to transportation. You may be dependent on family members or community members, and you may, not feel like you're being a burden to them, making those choices to not ask for that. So you're missing trips or not taking trips you otherwise would if you had stable and comfortable transportation mechanisms. Similarly, to food insecurity, which is somewhat where this idea started to germinate from the researchers at the University of Michigan who started the transportation insecurity idea, is that people often don't know in food insecurity. Part of the way to talk about that is people don't know where their next meal is coming from. Similarly, there are unfortunately lots of folks in the United States who lack certainty about how they will move through their day and reach critical destinations and critical services. Um, and then again, the impact that a lot of the research around transportation insecurity has shown is that missing and limiting opportunities and experiences because of a lack of resources and access to adequate systematic support can really impact people's day-to-day lives. And so that as a whole, lots of different definitions of it and lots of different versions of it really helps to kind of encapsulate what transportation insecurity is and what the Maddie program is aiming to do and to work with partners across the country to identify innovative approaches to addressing these types of challenges in transportation insecurity through through the Maddie program. So the program itself is an overview here. It's funded by the Federal Transit Administration and administered by the University of Minnesota and the Maddie program team. In addition to the U of M team, we are also joined by Tool Design and the Center for Neighborhood Technology, who are both our partners in the Maddie program and have been since the beginning in round one. In round one, which was the first initial round of this program, we started with 8 larger urban areas as our program cohort for the first phase of round one. That phase then led into phase 2, where 4 sites are actively in a demonstration right now. We are also currently in the midst of round 2. As a matter of fact, the teams in round 2 just submitted their plan documents, their demonstration plans to us just this last week. And we'll be selecting a single demonstration site from that round. And this is round 3 of this RFP. And again, the overall goal of the Maddie program is to solicit and support community up ideas for addressing transportation insecurity. It's not just to support the innovative interventions, but also a key component of what we're doing through this program is tracking and evaluating how they impact both individual and collective experiences with mobility and transportation. A goal of ours from the Maddie program team is to really be able to say to FTA, to partners like yourselves and all across the country, these are some of the ways that these particular interventions have impacted individual lives or communities' performances and abilities to access different destinations. So we really want to, it's not just about supporting the demonstrations themselves, it's actually also tracking that and understanding how particular forms of demonstration, particular approaches really impact individually and collectively the places that they are administered. One thing that's important to note about the MADI program is that we are not limited to traditional transportation approaches or modes. We're open to proposals that tie interconnected issues into transportation, thinking about health, housing, access to opportunity, education. Similarly, it's not just a public transit focus. We have had multiple successful things focused on public transportation. You can think about other ways and other modes that are connected to that. It's really about how are people moving and what modes make the most sense for your proposal. Within round three, one thing to highlight is that FTA has priority focus areas this time on transit-oriented development, safety, and security, which are things that we'll be looking for in proposals. We're not limited to those three. Those are high priority areas for us, but there's a whole list of other topics and other challenges in addition to those three priority focus areas from FTA that we would consider. But good to note that those three are of high interest to FTA and the MADI program in round three. To talk a little bit about how the program itself works, I've already hinted at this a little bit. Each round has two phases. In phase one, which is what you all as potential applicants would be looking for at this point or proposing on at this point, we will be funding up to 13 applicants in round three. Those 13 sites will receive up to 115,000, depending on their proposal, to support the development and submission of a plan for a proposed demonstration project to address transportation insecurity in your jurisdiction, in your community. And this is usually a 9 to 12 month process. In both round one and round two, we did 12 months and are anticipating mirroring that in round three, depending on the details of contracting timing and other things. It may have to shorten slightly, but the goal will be to use that 9 to 12 months to create a demonstration plan and submit it for consideration to move into phase two. In phase two for this RFP, again, remember we'll start with a funnel of 13 coming into phase one. In phase two, we will select 8 of those 13 to fund a full deployment of the demonstration. Those 8 sites will each receive up to $700,000 over 24 months to launch the demonstration and to collect the data and information our U of M program team needs to do the evaluation and research. I just will note as well, the up to 115 and the up to 700K are both just dependent on sites proposals, what your budgeting needs are and other things. So both of those numbers are sort of the cannot exceeds, but if a program team is proposing slightly less than that, that's also a possibility. That's why we just left the up to, just to clarify that. To give you a quick sense of how the different entities involved play a role, you can see this table here. This is also available in the RFP. All of this information is pulled from the RFP directly. So if there are specific questions, I can dig into it into Q&A, but you also can reference the RFP in more detail as well. But as you can see here, kind of across the board, we have applicants and the local partners, most of you all on this call, the MADI program team, the FTA, and then our MADI research committee. The MADI research committee has been helping us. It's been between 12 and 20 folks throughout the course of the program. They give us guidance on sort of how to approach the general question, how to think about the research efforts that we're doing and the research methods that we're doing. And as we move through the projects and have data to share with them, we'll also be talking with them about the conclusions and the ways to think about the outputs from each of these rounds. So as you can see, just kind of thinking through, if it's green, that's sort of the primary role for that actor. Yellow is sort of a secondary role. So thinking, kind of from the upper right here, the FTA is funding this program and does have some inputs into our program management, obviously, as we are a contractor to the FTA. We, the MADI team, led by the University of Minnesota and Center for Transportation Studies, run the full program management. The Maddie program team is the applicant selection body. The FDA does not directly weigh in on who we select for the rounds, aside from helping us give us the parameters of the RFP. Then once we get to the phases, obviously the local teams who are proposing are going to be responsible in phase one for the plan development. If you move into phase two, you'd be responsible for the deployment and management of that demonstration. And also the local teams do the data collection for the research in phase two if they get to that stage. The Maddie program team is there throughout each of those steps and support and technical assistance, but the local teams lead in all of those. In phase two, if you reach that demonstration phase, that's when the research is really happening, the data collection is happening. The Maddie program team, led by my co-PI Yingling Fan, would be leading the research and evaluation effort in conjunction with the rest of the Maddie program team and the local sites who are doing the data collection. And then we get feedback and insights from our partners at FDA, the Maddie Research Committee, and then obviously through the applicants and local partners who participate in phase one and phase two as well. And we've done a lot of learning through round one and round two as well, and are excited to be able to do a round three, still building from what we've learned with our partners who have participated in those previous rounds. A slightly different way to talk about the phases here for round three. Again, we're at sort of this Maddie RFP on the far left. You all who are potentially proposing, I'll go into the details and the dates of the expression of interest and other things shortly. But basically what will happen here is that you will be proposing a consortium of respondents, a team, to say, here's the type of challenge that we want to address. Here's how we think we want to address it. This is this initial phase and initial proposal. The Maddie team will review that and select phase one sites. Once those sites are selected and put under contract with the University of Minnesota, the deliverable for phase one is the demonstration plan itself. And those sites will submit that plan to the Maddie program team to compete to move into phase two. So once those sites submit the plan, there's another review stage. Again, this is about 9 to 12 months after the program is fully in swing, after we select the first phase one participants. We will review again, and then we'll select a subset of those phase one sites to do the demonstration itself. And that's when that additional 700K is available to those teams to do the full demonstration. Here's a little bit more of the detail of the program timeline. Again, a little bit of fungibility here, depending on specifically the contracting after we select the phase one participants. But the idea is that everyone will be submitting their proposals by September 30th. We will review and select those participants in the fall of 2026. Our hope is to do that by mid to late October. Once we select the 13 sites, we'll immediately begin to work on the contracting to get those teams fully into the program and set up the funding for phase one. And then over the course of that 9 to 12 months, roughly late fall 2026 to fall 2027, the local teams, the 13 teams in phase one will have that time period to develop a fully fleshed out demonstration plan that includes pretty significant community engagement asks, learning and sharing more about your community, thinking through what the demonstration is and how your community can inform what makes the most sense to address transportation insecurity in your context. Those proposals will be submitted. We anticipate that the competition to fund the full demonstrations then would also happen in pretty short order in that fall of 2027. And then again, selected probably late fall to early winter 2027 to 28, again, depending just on the timeline here. We will select the 8 sites to do the demonstration, and our intent would be that those 8 demonstration sites have as close to a full 2 years as possible to deliver the demonstration, again, depending on what the proposals are, what their budget requests are, and how long the funding that's available for each site allows them to do the demonstration and execute on the data collection. For this RFP specifically, a little bit more detail on the timeline, again, all in the RFP itself, but we released the RFP just 2 weeks ago now on the 21st. This is our first webinar. We will have another webinar next 10 days from now from 12 to 1, I believe, Central Time on August 13th. That is just an opportunity to get this general information, get some general questions and answers out there. We will also be holding just what we call office hours every Thursday starting on August 27th. Sorry, I should have this right in front of me. I'm going to confirm that time as well, which I believe is 11 o'clock. Um, Yep, from 11 o'clock to noon central each Thursday, from August 27th to September 17th, we'll be having those office hours. That is a very informal time that team members, interested partners, others can drop in and just ask myself or Beth questions about the program, questions you may have about your proposal, about the RFP, other things like that. A commitment that we have made across all of these touch points is that any question that feels like a universal question that is not detailed oriented for a particular team is something that we will share if there's sort of a universal finding or a universal response that would be useful for everybody to see. So those office hours will run almost all the way up until the proposal is due. It's the same day as the RFP questions are due, is the last day of the office hours. I skipped over the expression of interest. Sorry, I'll jump back to that for a second. This is a very simple form that we've used for all three RFPs that we have found very useful to understand sort of what is the amount of attention, what is the intention of teams to apply for the program. Helps us make sure that we have enough interest and enough potential applicants, and also that we can confirm everyone's eligibility. So that expression of interest, again, the link to that is available on the webpage. Beth, maybe that's something you could drop into the chat as well if folks haven't seen that. It is a very simple form. It asks you to describe who your team is, what jurisdiction you're representing, what your idea is in a very limited way. I believe a 2,000 character limit. So very, very short. It just helps us give a sense of what folks are thinking and proposing. And again, it will also allow us to just confirm your eligibility for this round. We will do that as quickly as possible with the hope that we are able to do that by August 28th to confirm everybody who submits the expression of interest is eligible. That is required to submit the expression of interest because we would like to confirm that everyone is eligible. We don't want to waste folks' time doing a full proposal only to come back to you to say, sorry, the team as you've constructed is ineligible or your project is ineligible, other things like that. So please do check out the expression of interest and make sure to do that by August 21st, just 3 weeks from now. And then most important date, obviously, after the expression of interest is the proposal due date itself. That is 5 p.m. Central Daylight Time on September 30th, 2026, which is a Wednesday. And there is information there. You're going to submit that via email to Beth. And we need those in by that time on the 30th in order to review and to have your proposal be eligible for the program. So RFP details a little bit more here. And again, all of this is reiterated in the RFP itself. But when you do the expression of interest, these are quickly the types of information we'll ask you. One thing to note here for round 3, in round 1 of Maddie, we used jurisdictions of over 50,000 as our eligibility cutoff within the United States. In round 2, it was less than 50,000 folks in your jurisdiction. And in round 3, we are looking for both large and small. There is no size limitation this time. It's our intent to try to fund projects from both of those categories, large and small. We're not evaluating that as an actual metric for selection of the program, but we do intend to aim to have competitive balance between small and large communities. So there is no limitation. That will not be an eligibility question in this round. So we are hoping to get lots of great ideas from across the country from communities of all sizes. We do ask you to identify whether or not a transit agency serves the community that you are working on or proposing to work in, if it does exist. The agencies themselves do not necessarily have to be a part of your proposing team. They absolutely can be, and you can look at the eligibility section in the RFP in more detail for additional information there. But we do want to know if there is one that serves the community, the jurisdiction that you're looking at. Obviously, this is more of a specific question for the potentially rural, smaller communities to understand if there are services there. But it's just useful for us to have you identify which transit agencies are there. We would like you to identify the proposed makeup of your team. You're not wedded to that if you do it in the expression of interest. We do need you to identify who your team lead is, and we need to confirm that you have an appropriate team lead. And I would especially call attention to the inclusion of a community-based organization as an important part of your team and a requirement for the proposal. And then again, just a brief 2,000 character limit description of your idea as it stands, or how you think you're going to approach the idea of addressing transportation insecurity. And as I said, we'll review these and give you, everyone who submits an EOI will get a confirmation of eligibility by the 28th. And your full proposal, again, is due on September 30th. I've already mentioned some of this. Jurisdictions of any size are eligible. One specific limitation in this round is that you cannot propose a project or a team from the same jurisdiction as a previous MADI program participant. So there are at this point 12 different jurisdictions across the United States that we have done a MADI program team, or sorry, that have participated in the MADI program. If your intervention and your cohort, your team is proposing a solution in the exact same jurisdiction, you won't be eligible. The one caveat of that is in our first two rounds, we have had a couple metropolitan planning organizations or counties apply, and we do not want to remove the eligibility for sub-jurisdictions of those two rather large jurisdictions to apply for MADI. So the example that I will give is in a previous round, the Boston MPO was one of our recipient leads. If you are proposing a project as a jurisdiction that is underneath the Boston MPO, that is eligible. If you are proposing a solution that is, again, serving the entire Boston MPO and is focused on that jurisdiction, that one would be ineligible. So we do want to give a chance for some of those smaller sub-jurisdictions to also have proposals if they do. But there's also at the top of the RFP a listing of all of those jurisdictions where you could not propose a specific MADI team for this round based on previous participation. So if you have more questions about that, please seek clarification in the Q&A, and I can pull that list up and talk through that one more time. Your applicant teams may include folks from the eligible team members list, which is again totally spelled out in the RFP, from outside the proposed jurisdiction. So for example, I'm in Minneapolis today, so just using this as an example, if I propose a project in Minneapolis, I am allowed to have somebody from outside the city of Minneapolis on my team, a partner who is regional or even national in scale, who I'm saying they're going to play this role here. That's fine. There does need to be a local team lead and somebody who and a community-based org that is tied to the location that your proposal is from. And then just another thing to note, proposals can also include multiple jurisdictions. So you can propose interventions that are a service or an idea that links to jurisdictions. You don't have to be just proposing on one singular one. We again want sort of innovative solutions that are context specific for your sites and your groups. Any of the sites that are any of the jurisdictions that are a part of a proposal do need to be eligible though. So again, you can't propose to do a project in one of the current cities that has a MADI program in it, even if it's just one of multiple that you're doing. So no previously served MADI program participants can be a part of a multiple jurisdiction project. Team structure, again, our goal is to really enable you all to think through your partnerships and who you work with and what the challenges are that you have. So we have a pretty broad definition of who can be on a team. I'm not going to speak through every single one of these. Again, these are available on the RFP itself. But a few things to note in detail. We do have a requirement for a nonprofit or community-based org that is linked to the jurisdiction that you're talking about. That group needs to have up to 40% or at least 40% of the budget in this phase one, because we really want to make sure they're a part of the program that you're proposing and the work you're proposing, and really foregrounding organizations that can get community buy-in and engagement to help shape the intervention and understand the challenges of transportation insecurity in your local context. A range of other public agencies and government entities can be a part of your team. Tribes, local government units, public transportation agencies, as well as private transportation providers. So you could include a micromobility partner, a shared mobility partner, other entities doing that. The other thing that I'll highlight here would be that you can have a for-profit employer or a for-profit organization on a team. They cannot be the lead applicant. So the one group that can't be the lead applicant would be a for-profit organization or business. Universities, other research organizations can absolutely lead and be a part of teams. The one caveat that we're giving folks from our university peers and have in each of the previous rounds is that on the research side, universities who are interested in doing a project that they would also intend to research or try to collect data on will be working with and through the University of Minnesota. You don't get to conduct a separate evaluation or research on the demonstration project that isn't done in conjunction with the Maddie team. And the Maddie team and Fan, who is our lead, will have sort of the ultimate say on sort of what is the research and evaluation plan and is willing and able to incorporate thinking and needs from the local teams, including any university partners. But our team is primarily responsible for that evaluation and research. I've alluded to this a little bit already, but just to kind of describe this a little bit in more detail, the team structure requirements, again, are relatively loose compared to some of the other proposals you've probably seen in the past. But what we are looking for specifically, beyond saying you can propose whatever arrangement you would like as long as these elements are met, the nonprofit or the community-based org that is tied into your local jurisdiction, again, has to have 40% of the budget in phase one. We want to make sure that that's not just sort of a low-key tie-in or like a kind of lip service commitment. We really want that nonprofit and community-based org to be a part of this. We've had great success with that in round one and round two, and ensuring that the solutions that are being proposed, the demonstrations that are being proposed, are really rooted in what those CBO groups and their constituents at the local level have identified. So that's been really successful. We also need an applicant lead that has to be identified from the eligible entities I just talked through. That group has to have at least 30% of the proposed budget as well. The nonprofit community-based org and the lead could be the same entity. If they are not the same entity, the community-based nonprofit has to have 40%. The applicant lead has to have at least 30% of the budget. And again, we do that requirement for the applicant lead to ensure that the lead is substantially invested in the project, has the resources and the time and the efforts in phase one to be able to execute the plan. One other note is that team members that are not receiving funding through the budget are not allowed to be the applicant lead. So any member of your eligible team can be doing that in kind and can be saying, we support this project, we're not getting budget. They cannot be the lead if that's the case. And one other note with that, this next bullet point is if they are mentioned in the proposal without dedicated budget, it is a good idea to have some sort of documentation as a part of your full proposal when you get to September. That just is a confirmation from an unfunded partner that says, we're aware that we're listed unfunded. We intend to be in an advisory role or make X resources available or whatever that might look like. While the definition of the team is very broad, and we expect and have seen through the previous two rounds a lot of different types of teams put together. One thing to note is that we will give greater consideration and review to those teams that have the combination of a nonprofit, CBO, and a committed public agency or jurisdictional partner. Again, who that partner is can be one of many of the eligible entities I identified in the previous slide. But we have found that CBO nonprofit slash local jurisdiction or public agency partnership has been helpful in these previous rounds and would encourage you to consider that as a part of your team structure. More on the budget itself, and I'm almost through this piece and we'll get to the Q&A for you all as well, but just want to go through some of this in detail. The phase one budget of up to $115,000 again is to support the development of the demonstration project plan. We do have a budget template in the RFP. It's again very simple. We ask you to follow that. You can make a copy of that and fill it for yourself. A few things to highlight there that you'll definitely need to identify in your budget plan is ensuring that you have adequate budget in the team lead for a project manager to really ensure that the project will have the momentum and the foundation of a staff lead to ensure it's successful. You should obviously budget for the other team members to participate in the plan. Again, the requirements are that 30% for the team lead, 40% for the nonprofit CBO. One thing that every team should budget for as well is travel of 1 day and 2 nights for at least 2 members of your team the project lead or project manager, and one other team member to join us at an in-person convening in Minneapolis for all of the phase one participants, which would likely happen probably in mid to late spring or early summer of 2027. So about 6 months into the phase one. Just as a sense of other stuff that spending is eligible for, all obviously to be reviewed by the University of Minnesota and within line of federal rules. But what has been a part of people's budgets in the past rounds are thinking about community honoraria for participants in surveys or engagement efforts, reimbursement for food at engagement efforts, translation services, other things as you're doing the planning and outreach. You will have technical assistance from either Tool or C&T if you're in phase one, but you could also think about the 115K being able to support additional planning, preliminary engineering, development of technical materials that help make the case for your demonstration plan. It can either be a member of your team or you could think about subcontracting if that's something you know you're going to need. Those are potentially eligible again. And then another important piece of this program is that there is no match requirement to participate in the Maddie program. You're allowed to bring in kind if you'd like, or if you have a partner who says we have money available to augment the 115, we can talk about that, and that's certainly a possibility, but no one is required to bring that additional match. If you do have either in kind or other cash match that partners want to bring to the table, you should document that in your full proposal due in September with a letter of support that again denotes that in specifics with that partner. To talk just briefly about what the proposal itself will entail, this is not the expression of interest, but the full proposal. These are some of the key elements that we'll look for. Again, this is all spelled out pretty concretely in the RFP, but we would expect that you define what you think your intervention is and why you think it'll be impactful, or what your idea for building through phase one is going to look at and try to address. We want to understand who in your jurisdiction, who in your community will it impact, and specifically how are you going to work to involve that group in shaping your demonstration and your demonstration plan. We'll ask you to talk about your project team. Why is it the right team? How are you positioned to be effective? How are you going to do the work in the demonstration when you get to that? Sorry, in round one, not the demonstration. And then just to talk briefly again, the metrics we'll use to evaluate are also available in the RFP. But here are some of the things that we'll be looking at the Maddie program team as we winnow down to the participating 13 proposals. How it serves the range of priority populations that we identify in the RFP, how it talks about the critical issues in transportation and security, including those key focus areas of transit-oriented development, safety, and security, but a longer list as well in addition to that in the RFP. Really looking at the scalability and applicability of a proposed demonstration. Again, we'll be evaluating the work of any of the sites that move into demonstration. And so we would love to see things that are going to be applicable and shareable, at least in aspects of it, to other communities and other efforts after our program if we're able to show a demonstration is particularly successful. The team that you're proposing with is really critical as well. Obviously, you need to meet those requirements for participation for a nonprofit or CBO, but we also really want to be able to see a commitment and a level of corresponding interaction and relationship built and partnership between proposed team members. Anything you can do to show sort of work you've done together or questions you're working towards with one another or ways you're showing buy-in apart from all of the team members would be good. And then also a really clear plan for community member buy-in and participation. Again, we really want to make sure these proposals and the planning efforts are led by community need and individual needs. And we want to see that pulled into what a demonstration proposal would look like and what you would look at in phase one as well. And then we will look at things like feasibility of the overall project itself. We're looking for innovative ideas. We're looking for ideas that can help really address transportation and security, but they also need to be things that could really meaningfully be a demonstration within a 12-month timeline. Also, we just want to make sure it's a programmatic fit for Maddie itself and the budget. So, if we think what you're proposing is a brand new train project, for example, that's probably not going to be feasible to demonstrate in $700,000. So we would be looking for sort of the appropriateness of an intervention as well. And then also just thinking about the potential long-term impacts, both sustainability of a project and of a demonstration for your community, the idea that you might be able to continue to fund something that happens after the Maddie program, and then also something that maybe is scalable, as I talked about before. So just reiterating quickly one more time, future touch points, another version of this conversation. You could join later on if you just have other Q&As if you don't want to hear the same presentation, but that'll be next week. We will also have those office hours, as I mentioned, starting August 27th. You can submit questions to either Beth or I by September 17th, and we will post those to a rolling document that we'll put up after today if we have any other questions. But everybody will be able to see those FAQs and those answers. I would reiterate once more, most of you are likely on our mailing list right now, but if you aren't, you should join the Maddie mailing list because if we do make an amendment or clarification to the RFP, we always make sure not only to post it to the RFP itself, but also to share it with that mailing list.